EVs, hydrogen and petrol, the truth about what's next. Electric vehicles. A few years ago, we were told they'd take over the world by now. But here we are in 2025, demand's flattened, hydrogen's mostly stuck in the slow lane, and petrol? Well, it's got a finite future. So what's next? What's really going to power our cars for the next 25 years? Before we even talk technology, there's a big snag that doesn't fit neatly into the glossy EV ads, the power grid. In a lot of places, the grid's underfunded, aging, and already struggling just to keep the lights on. Now imagine thousands of high-speed EV chargers, each one pulling as much power as a small supermarket. Put a bank of them together and you're basically building a substation next to the car park. That's expensive, takes years to approve, and in many towns and cities, it's just not going to happen. So unless battery tech changes drastically, we simply can't charge our way to a fully electric future without rebuilding the entire power network. And nobody's paying for that anytime soon. And here's another thing you won't see in the sales brochure. What happens to an EV when it reaches the end of its life? A regular petrol or diesel car. We've been recycling those for decades. Steel, aluminium, copper. About 85% of the vehicle can be reclaimed and reused without too much trouble. But an EV, you've got a battery pack that can weigh half a ton, full of lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, and rare earth elements, all locked inside hundreds of sealed cells. Getting those materials back is incredibly labor-intensive, requires specialized high-temperature and chemical processes, and often uses more energy than it's worth. Right now, globally, less than 10% of EV batteries are being recycled. Many end up in long-term storage, get exported to developing countries, or, worst case, straight into landfill. And once they're in the ground, those chemicals don't just sit there politely. They will leach into soil and groundwater when the casing fails. Even when we do recycle them, the process often involves smelting, acids, and solvents that create toxic byproducts. And here's the kicker. The tsunami of worn-out EV batteries expected from the mid-2030s onwards will completely overwhelm the small number of recycling plants that exist today. So while EVs are zero emissions at the tailpipe, their end-of-life footprint is a problem that the industry hasn't solved and isn't ready for. And here's something more you won't often hear in the headlines. The cars we drive today are already dramatically cleaner than they were 20 years ago. Take nitrogen oxides, those nasty gases that cause smog. Back in the early 2000s, a typical petrol car could legally pump out around 500 milligrams per kilometre under Euro 3 standards. Today, under Euro 6, the limit's just 60 milligrams. That's an 88% drop. Carbon monoxide, down by more than 90% over the same period. Particulates. Modern petrol direct injection engines with particulate filters have cut those to almost nothing. In some cases, the exhaust is literally cleaner than the air going into the engine. And it's not just the lab numbers. Roadside air quality monitoring in cities like London, Los Angeles, and Sydney shows massive reductions in vehicle-related pollutants since the early 2000s, even though the number of cars on the road has gone up. Hybrids make it even better, because the engine's off a lot of the time. So yes, EVs are zero emissions at the tailpipe, but modern petrol and diesel engines have already slashed their pollution footprint by 90% or more compared to 2 decades ago. And with cleaner synthetic fuels, they can cut the rest. Let's review the next 25 years. 2025 to 2035, the transitional decade. EV growth will keep moving, but slowly. The early adopters are already in, but the average buyer's still wary. Cost, range anxiety, and long charging times aren't helping. Hybrids and plug-in hybrids. They'll do most of the heavy lifting, especially in countries like Australia where the charging network is patchy. Synthetic fuels, petrol made from captured carbon and renewable energy, will start trickling into motorsport, luxury brands, and maybe some aviation. Still pricey, but they work in existing engines. Battery improvements will be steady but small, maybe 10 to 20% more range every few years, and quietly, governments will start delaying their no new petrol car deadlines because the infrastructure just won't be ready. 2035 to 2045, the multi-fuel era. By the mid-2030s, we start seeing bigger shifts. Solid-state batteries arrive, 600 to 800 kilometer ranges, and 15 to 20-minute charging. That's a genuine leap forward. But here's the part that's going to surprise a lot of people. Synthetic and biofuels aren't just for show. They actually work right now in the engines we've already got. Synthetic fuels, or e-fuels, are made by combining hydrogen, produced from renewable electricity, with carbon dioxide captured from the atmosphere or industrial sources. The result is a liquid fuel that behaves just like petrol or diesel, but when you burn it, you're basically recycling the carbon instead of adding new CO2 to the atmosphere. The beauty: you don't need to reinvent the car. Your existing petrol engine will run on it without modification. Porsche, for example, is already making e-fuel in Chile using wind power. Right now, they're producing about 130,000 litres a year, aiming for millions in the next decade. Yes, it's expensive today, 8 to 10 times the cost of pump petrol. But that's exactly where solar and wind were 20 years ago before scaling drove prices down. Then there are biofuels, made from plant matter, waste oils, or even algae. They're already in use in aircraft, buses, and trucks. They're not perfectly carbon neutral because of farming and processing, but they slash life cycle emissions compared to fossil fuels. The big advantage: you can use the same infrastructure we've already got, service stations, pipelines, tankers, without spending billions on new systems. That makes synthetic and biofuels a realistic bridge for the billions of petrol and diesel vehicles on the road right now. The catch is scaling up production to replace a meaningful chunk of the world's fuel will take decades and cheap renewable electricity. But for performance cars, classics, aviation, and heavy transport, they're one of the most practical solutions we've got. And then there's hydrogen, the perennial next big thing. Sounds perfect, right? Zero emissions, quick refueling. But here's the catch. You can't just dig it up, you have to make it, and making it cleanly is expensive and energy hungry. Most hydrogen today comes from natural gas, so it's not really green at all. It's a nightmare to store and transport. To fit enough in a car, you have to compress it to 700 bar, that's 10,000 psi, or chill it to minus 253 degrees Celsius. Either way, you're dealing with complex tanks, safety risks, and huge energy use just to keep it in the right state. And infrastructure, almost non-existent. On us, building hydrogen stations is even more expensive than fast EV chargers, and you can't just hook them to the grid. They need dedicated delivery systems or on-site production. Even Twiggy Forrest, who poured billions into hydrogen projects and was one of its loudest champions, has quietly pulled back. He's scaled down his hydrogen ambitions after running headfirst into the brutal economics and logistical headaches of making it work at scale. That's why hydrogen works for heavy trucks, buses, and maybe ships, but for everyday cars, forget it, at least for the next couple of decades. 2045 to 2050, the consolidation era. By the late 2040s, the market's settled. Two main drivetrains dominate: EVs for urban and commuter use, and synthetic fuel hybrids or ICEs for long trips, towing, and enthusiast cars. The EV charging times are almost as quick as filling a petrol tank, but only where the grid's been upgraded. Oil demand has collapsed, and petrol's mostly used for plastics and chemicals, not transport. The average daily driver is quiet, autonomous, and software-controlled. But on weekends, you can still fire up your loud, manual, petrol-breathing toy, running on clean synthetic fuel. and enjoy driving the way it used to be. So here's the takeaway. The future isn't all electric, and it's not all petrol either. It's going to be a mix: EVs, hybrids, and synthetic fuel engines sharing the roads. Hydrogen will have its place in freight. Petrol will bow out gracefully, but some will still be available. And for car lovers, the good news is simple. The cars we love aren't disappearing. They're just evolving. This has been a production by Curious Jag. Please like and subscribe.